I feel at this point in time, the Garden Warfare games need absolutely no introduction. The Plants vs Zombies franchise going from a basic tower defense game to a third-person online multiplayer shooter is a move that absolutely no one saw coming, but everyone was welcome to be a part of. These games just did so much right, and with the current state of PopCap being as bad as it is, I thought it would be a fun idea to nostalgically reflect upon the playable characters in these shooters. So why don't we go through the entire roster of the Garden Warfare games and decide what Pokemon types each of the playable characters would be. This is currently the second installment in this series, so if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to subscribe and let me know down below what franchise I should do this with next. Now, when discussing Pokemon types with plants and zombies, there are two big hurdles we need to clear first. These are all plants and these are all zombies. All of the plants are going to have the grass type, so for them, this basically just comes down to what secondary typing I think they'd have. And likewise for the zombies, they're all going to have the ghost type, as the ghost type is the closest thing in the Pokemon world to a truly undead type. Also, I'm not going to be covering variants, sorry if that upsets you, but you know, this one's a dark type, this one's an electric type. I feel these are pretty self-explanatory and I don't want to be doing this for an hour. So we're only going to be covering the default playable classes, and speaking of, let's start with Peashooter. So there was nothing that really stuck out to me when it came to covering Peashooter's typings, apart from grass for obvious reasons. And whilst I very well could just make him a pure grass type, I think that would be a pretty lame one to start on. So instead, I suggest we give Peashooter the flying type. Hyper has to be one of the most annoying abilities to deal with within all of the PVZ shooters. It is such an infamous ability that it's pretty much all that Peashooter gameplay has become over the years. Just run up to someone, press Hyper, and hope your splash damage manages to get you a kill. There is absolutely nothing else to this character. Now, reverting back to the actual flying type itself, many moves that actually involve the act of just flying upwards instead of actually flying are considered to be flying type. A good example of this is the move Bounce. And if this isn't bouncing, then I don't know what this is. Also, not all flying type Pokemon can actually fly, and some flying type Pokemon like Gyarados for example, can't really learn any flying based moves. And to top all of this off, even though I'm not considering Battle for Neighborville in this video, they replaced the hyper ability in that game for the Peashooter with an ability that temporarily allows him to fly. And hence, I think I have made my case pretty clear. I think Peashooter would be a flying type, but I know some people are going to disagree with this one, so let me know down below what you'd think he'd be instead. So we'll alternate between the plants and the zombies, so let's cover the Foot Soldier next. Foot Soldier was another bit of a tough one. I don't want to give him the flying type because I just gave that to Peashooter, and apart from that there was nothing else that really stuck out to me. So just like with Peashooter, we're going to have to focus on his abilities to find us a type, and by doing this, I think the poison type fits him pretty well. The Zombie Stink Cloud is one of Soldier's abilities that has been iconic enough to make it into all of the games he's been in. It's a throwable area of effect stink cloud that damages all plants that walk in it. And if we relate this to Pokemon types, most bad smelling Pokemon or stinky things as such are poison type. Again, flying could fit him just as well, but we just gave that to Peashooter, so for the sake of repeats, I'd like to give him the poison type instead. And it's, you know, it's not entirely out of left field, I feel it does fit him. So poison it is. Some of these entries are long, some of these entries are short, but I really don't have much else to say with Foot Soldier. Speaking of short entries, let's cover Sunflower next, because you saw the thumbnail, so you already know I'm giving her the grass fire type. So with these types of videos, it's my natural instinct to give healers and support characters the fairy type, as generally fairy types learn a lot of supportive and healing moves. However, last time I thought I'd fight that instinct and give the healer character the types that had the most healing moves, which ended up being normal and grass, and people weren't happy about that. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to continue to fight my instincts. Instead of making Sunflower a grass fairy type, I'm going to have to make her a grass fire type, because it's a sunflower. Sun is in the name, after all, and I feel that people would be very, very angry if I did not give the Sunflower the fire type. But next time, I promise you, I will make a healer a fairy type. Wow, I said that as if this isn't my own video where I can do what I want with it. Anyway, we've been going in class order so far, so why don't we mix things up and talk about Captain Deadbeard? I'd say overall, I've struggled massively when coming up with Pokemon types for the zombies than compared to the plants. With the plants, it just seems pretty simple with a lot of them, but for the zombies, I've had to get more creative, and with Captain Deadbeard, I have done just that. Captain Deadbeard is going to be a ghost water type, purely for the reason that he is a pirate. The more I think about it, the funnier this seems to me, and the more I feel like an actual genius, but I dare you to come up with any other type Deadbeard could possibly be. I will let you know that I did consider the dark type for him, because I'd really like to have one dark type zombie, but if any dark type zombies, Deadbeard just doesn't really seem to fit that. So water type it is, and I defy you to challenge me with anything else it could possibly be. Oh yeah, and in case anyone's wondering, I guess the parrot drone would be ghost flying. I'm not going to be doing this with all the abilities, but I will be doing this with the drones. And I know the parrot is technically a robot, but yeah, we've got ghost steel coming up later, you'll see. And along the topic of snipers, let's shuffle back over to the plants and talk about Cactus. Cactus is the closest I've come to giving anyone just a pure grass type, and that's really boring because I'm aiming for dual types in this video to make it interesting. But there was just nothing about Cactus that screamed anything else but grass type. But then it hit me. If theoretically we'd consider the garlic drone as grass flying, then surely Cactus should be grass ground. In the last video, I gave Heavy the ground type because he is one of the characters with absolutely no mobility tech whatsoever, and the same fits for Cactus too. So, I think she'd be a grass ground type, purely out of juxtaposition with the garlic drone. I am such a genius. Back to the zombies now, so let's talk about Scientist. So there are 3 zombies which I consider to be in the realm of Psychic when it comes to their typings, yet I feel out of all of them, it fits Scientist the best. So I'm giving Scientist the Ghost Psychic typing. Intelligence in the Pokemon world is often betrayed by the Psychic type. So any character that utilizes their own intellect or some sort of technology we couldn't easily explain, I am more willing to give the Psychic type too. Going back to plants now, let's talk about Chomper and how torn I was between making him either a grass poison type or a grass ground type. Chomper to me seems like one of those plants that could really be all 3 types depending on how you slice it, and I'd be utterly fine with it. But considering how I want to keep them all grass type, I'd have to choose between either poison or ground type. I feel poison type would work really well on Chomper due to his sticky goops, and equally so I feel ground type would work really well because of his ability to dig into the ground. But it was actually giving Cactus the ground type that made me realise that giving Chomper the poison type probably makes a bit more sense for him. And I don't want to have repeats. Even though I would personally choose ground for Chomper, I feel poison is probably what everyone else would choose, and so we'll go with that. Super Brainz is up next, and finally I get to give someone the fighting type. The fighting type is one of my favourite offensive types to use. There are so many good moves and strong Pokemon of this type, and it feels absolutely wonderful to break defensive steel walls using fighting moves. And I feel that that's the exact kind of thing Super Brainz would do. Now if you wanted to make the argument that he was instead Ghost Psychic due to his kind of, you know, laser beamy stuff, I'd be more than willing to hear you out. In fact, he's one of the 3 candidates I mentioned earlier that I considered for the Psychic typing, but for the sake of keeping things unique and for the sake of Super Brainz, I feel the fighting type fits him very well. Citron comes next, and originally I had him down as grass and steel. The steel typing doesn't just represent the physical makeup of a Pokemon, it can also represent their nature or the overall build. And considering how Citron was the original tank for the plants team, I feel the steel type fits him pretty well thematically. But I knew that if I had just left him as a steel type, this probably wouldn't have gone down very well with people. And then I started to think more. And then I realised that the water type fits him even more. And if you haven't already guessed it, it's because he is an orange. Like, I really don't know why this wasn't my first thought. It just seems so obvious. He's an orange. Orange is a juicy. He's a water type. And at the end of the day, this is the choice I am the most confident in. I don't want to hear any arguing about this one in the comments. Unless you want to make fun of the way I pronounce orange because I'm British, then, you know, go ahead or something. I don't care. Now for the remaining zombies, this is where things get tricky, as for all 3 of these guys, I could very well see them having the steel type. All of these zombies either have some sort of steely aspect about them or work directly with metal and machinery. So only choosing one of them to have the steel type was the hardest part of coming up with the types for this video. But in the end, I have decided to give the steel type to All-Star. This is probably not the one people wanted me to give it to. They probably wanted me to give it to Imp or something. But overall, not only because All-Star is the tank of the zombie team, but also because of his ability to place walls and be a wall for his team as well, I feel he has to have the steel type. I do have some other types that fit for the other characters very well, but like I said earlier, any one of these 3 guys could have had the steel type. But we'll put a pin in that for now as we pivot back to the plants to talk about the Kernal Corn. Kernal Corn is one mean mother shucker. He was canonically fighting overseas during the events of the first Garden Warfare game, and is completely obsessed with the idea of war and combat to the point where it's probably quite unhealthy, so we're giving him the fighting type. Yeah, there's not really much more explaining I need to do on this one. If Kernal Corn isn't fighting, I genuinely can't think of any other type he could possibly be. So we'll just cut that there and go back to the zombies. We'll talk about Engineer next. So last time when I spoke about the TF2 engineer, people seemed to be quite annoyed that I called him Steel Psychic instead of Steel Electric, and I 100% stand by my decision. The TF2 engineer isn't directly involved with electricity, but he most certainly is a very intelligent man, and therefore the Psychic type fits him way better than the Electric type does. But to all those people who said I did them wrong, I'm giving the engineer of Garden Warfare the Electric type. I personally do not believe this type combination fits as well as Ghost Steel would, however I am both trying to desperately avoid repeats and appease everyone who believed I wronged them last time, because for some reason there was an awful lot of them. So there you go, hopefully this makes someone out there happy to some degree. And with that, we are down to our final plant. I feel Rose's secondary typing will be one of the more heavily debated ones in this video, as so many of Rose's abilities overlap with both the Psychic and Fairy types. But if I had to choose one, I think Psychic fits Rose a lot more. Among Rose's abilities are Time Snares, turning zombies into goats, and homing thistles, and I think these are much more aligned with the Psychic type than they do the Fairy type. But again, I could see my decision going either way on any day, so let's move on before I change my mind, as the time has finally come to discuss the Imp. So to the 9 of you who made it this far into the video, I'm sure you are pretty confused as to what Imp's secondary typing might be, as I've already given out the Steel type. And I was confused myself, I struggled for a bit. If not Steel, I didn't know what he'd be. And then I landed upon the idea of giving him the Dark type. And I'm giving him the Dark type purely because anyone who plays this character is evil. And, you know, because I feel Imps overall live for destruction, and I think they're pretty evil just by nature. This one will be another heavily argued one, I'm sure about that. However, I really want a Dark type zombie, and I feel Imps are pretty evil, so I'm perfectly fine with this, cry about it. And with that, that's all of the Garden Warfare characters, and what Pokemon types I think— wait, no, hold on, I forgot Torchwood and Hovergoat. Yeah, I completely forgot these characters existed. Grassfire, Ghost Psychic. I'm sorry these are repeats, I tried desperately to avoid that throughout the video, however, Torchwood is Grassfire and Hovergoat is Ghost Psychic. And there we go, that's all of the Garden Warfare playable characters and what Pokemon types I think they'd be. Be sure to like and subscribe if you've made it this far into the video, and comment down below Chestnut my beloved, just so I know that you have. And whilst you're at it, if you have any other ideas for franchises you'd like me to do this kind of video for, let me know as well. I think Persona might come next, but we'll see how this video does. And with that, one final thank you from me for watching, and I will see you later down the sunny road.